they say concept. So I may ask a question like, what's the significance of they say? Why do we start with what others have said first? So kind of know the rationale behind why we utilize the they say, I say model. And that's really laid out in chapter 1. With chapter 2, it's all about the art of summarizing.
Hello, Miss Cole.
Yes. Yes. Can you
Miss
hear me,
Cole?
Julia? Yes.
We can get you.
Are you guys not hearing me?
I can.
Yeah, I could hear you.
I could hear you.
I can hear you.
I can hear you too.
Okay, I think most people can hear me. You can't hear me, Julia?
I hear you now, Miss Cole.
Okay. I may need to talk louder because I know they have the construction going on outside, so I'll make sure that I speak up a tad bit. But with the chapter 2, which is all about the art of summarizing, I may ask a question like, what is a characteristic of an effective summary, right? So chapter 2, it kind of gave best practices for summarizing. So I think, and I mentioned this last class period about posting the presentation that I covered about chapters 1 and 2, posting that to the week 4 module just for your review. The catch with that is it's a OneDrive document. So I would have to send this link, and then it's an edit, the link allows the users to edit it. And I really don't want you guys to edit it if possible. So I'll share it, but really kind of preface it with, do not change anything in the presentation, just kind of use it to review. So other than that, chapter 1 and 2, maybe one question from each chapter, not maybe, there will be one question from each chapter. I'll also ask you guys, as you know, everything else is about the what is argument video. So specifically, again, know the difference between traditional and consensual. Know the difference between ethical and unethical argument. Know that equation. So when I use the phrase, what is the equation we use for argument? No equation is kind of like, this mathematical formula. So claim plus support equals argument. And we're actually going to talk a lot more about that today, but know that formula. Today, we're going to be introduced to our first paper assignment. So this whole formula of claim plus support equals argument, that is I can say guideline or the outline that you guys will be using to write your paper. So know that. I also pointed out, know the 5 components under which argument works best. And beyond that, there shouldn't be any real surprises. I always throw in a bonus question just to kind of give students an opportunity to earn points in case we have any brain flubs. I know it happens sometimes with assessments or quizzes. So just a hint on that, know about rhetorical situation. So we'll talk a little bit more about rhetorical situation today, but hopefully I think that covers everything that will be covered on test. You guys know it will be Monday at the start of class. So as you guys are coming in, making sure you're on time, which you guys are really, like good example for showing up on time, being present. So I don't worry about that too much, but if you think about sleeping in on Mondays or maybe kind of blowing off Monday, just be mindful quizzes. And quizzes are an in-class assignment. I do not give makeup quizzes. So make sure that if you are missing any day, that you're present on Monday to be able to take that assessment. Again, 5 or 6 questions, first 20 minutes of class. So we get in and get out to get it done. Okay. What can I say? The issue with having a online quiz is a unique one, but like I definitely trust you guys. If the quiz will be administered through Brightspace, so as you guys are coming in, I'll give you all that information on Monday. So just be prepared, look for that. And if you guys have any questions between now and Monday, let me know. All right. That little tidbit of information out of the way. Another thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is a couple announcements. If you guys have been getting any notifications to your phone today, I've been updating the grades in the grade book. So you guys did a really good job on the internet scavenger hunt. So I'm adding that, as well as the questionnaire, the rhetorical situation question that you guys completed for the stigmas in mass media article. So we're going to pick up from that too. I felt rushed a little bit on Monday, and a lot of students kind of dropped really important points in the chat box prior to us dismissing class. So I'm going to pick up there just a little bit before we get into our discussion of the article Stereotype Threat. But okay, yeah, so know that there's movement with grades. Know that I'll kind of be going in this weekend, so you guys may get a lot of dings to your Brightspace app, get a lot of notifications. Because you guys are writing your first paper, which we'll talk about that too, but because you're being introduced to your first paper topic, I'm going back over your diagnostic writing. You guys remember that writing you completed week 1 of the semester, where I was kind of assessing your writing skills. I'm going into that assignment and giving you guys like single sentence feedback, but it's something just to make you aware as you're writing your arguments, just something to be aware of. This may be something that, like I want to make sure you are aware of, perhaps maybe if I see in your diagnostic that you didn't indent, maybe I saw that you may include fragments in your writing. I'll drop just a small single sentence note just so you can have some idea of what to avoid, what to be on the lookout for as you write your own arguments. So just to give you a tad bit of feedback there. So look for that. I'm sure you guys will kind of get the notifications. Another thing is the welcome videos. I'm also kind of going back into the welcome videos. I'm creating some rubrics for how I grade discussion board assignments. So there'll be a little movement there. So just to give you guys a heads up. And also, because I don't get a chance to see your faces a lot, I've been revisiting the welcome videos just to kind of remind myself of student goals. Again, just, to kind of see your faces and get familiar with, your goals in the class. So you may see some movement there and some comments. So look for that. All right, yeah, so that was my notes there, because I know lots of times students see movements, they get to email me, so just be prepared. There will be movement in gradebook as well as your other assignments in Brightspace. All righty. So the homework that we are discussing today, I know you guys had to submit a summary about the Stereotype Threat article that we just read. I gave a little bit of a small extension on that. If students didn't have it ready at the start of class, I'm okay with that. You can turn it in at some point today, but I will do my best to be careful in today's class not to really give information about main idea, etc. The summary assignment is my opportunity not only to see your summary skills, but to see your reading comprehension skills. What are you picking up in terms of identifying the author's claim, identifying that main idea? So I was able to see that in the trace questionnaire that you guys submitted about the last article. So that's where I want us to start. Let me pull up our Brightspace page really quickly. Let me share. All right, and while I'm doing that, I see a quick question from Jariah, so let me just answer you. What notes, PowerPoints are helpful to review for the quiz? What is argument is what I call paramount. That's kind of the basis of the quiz, so that what is argument presentation is the main one that'll help. All right, Let me share with you guys my screen. All right, really good job, you guys, on the assignment. Oh, this isn't what I wanted to have up, sorry. Hold on. Really good work on the trace assignment. You guys remember rhetorical situation. Let me just kind of get a quick review. What do you guys remember if you were asked to define the rhetorical situation? How do we define the rhetorical situation? What is the rhetorical situation? What do you guys remember? Let me stop share while I kind of work on this. And this is a quick review, so no answer is technically wrong, but what do you guys remember as far as your understanding of the rhetorical situation?
Just double check on the rhetorical situation about mass media stigma, right?
Right, now the mass media, the stigmas in mass media, that is the article that you guys analyzed using the rhetorical situation. So the homework that we discussed on Monday's class, where you guys analyze the text, you analyze the reader or the audience, the author, you also looked at any constraints that stood in the way of you accepting the author's argument. We talked about exigence. So that is the rhetorical situation. You guys use that to analyze the article. But what do we know or remember about the rhetorical situation? What is that? All right, Tatiana says it is the point that the author is trying to get across about a certain topic or situation. I like that, Tatiana. It is the author's point, but when we think about rhetorical situation, I know you guys know the word rhetoric, right? Or maybe you've heard the term rhetorical question, right? It's important to put the term rhetorical situation in its proper context when we are talking about argument or this art of persuasion. So rhetorical situation is this philosophy of communication. It's one that was created by Aristotle, and it considers how language is used to persuade or convince. So if you are ever asked about wink, wink, possibly maybe bonus question, I'm not sure, but if you're ever asked about what is the rhetorical situation, how do you define rhetorical situation? It is language used to persuade, okay? Look, to add emphasis, let me add this to our chat. Language used to persuade. That is the rhetorical situation. So that is why when you guys were analyzing the article, Stigmas in Mass Health, you were asked specific question. Well, what's the author's claim? What is the author's main point or main idea? How did the author support this main idea or main claim? Who is the author's intended audience? What do we know about the audience? How is the author attempting to establish common ground? So all of these questions that you guys answered, it's looking at how language is used to persuade or convince. So when you are analyzing the text, whether that is a speech, whether that is an article, you're looking at how this language is used in the text. The author's articulation of their issue, of their position on an issue. Are you able to identify it? Is it clear? Do you feel that the evidence and support and information, is strong and is compelling enough to persuade and convince you? There was a question on the analysis that asked about rhetorical strategies. Rhetorical appeals. Do you guys remember that portion? And let me pull it up so we can have a frame of reference. So as we went through those questions, and let me go back to it, I think it was under module 3. Yeah, as we went over the rhetorical situation questions, there was a small question at the end that we didn't get a chance to talk about in class. So let's go to that. The rhetorical appeal, you guys see this at the bottom. And I also saw where students answered this question, but it asked you, list 1 or 2 examples of each rhetorical appeal that you see in the text. And a lot of students correctly identified. I saw you guys mention logos. I saw you mention pathos and ethos or ethos. I say it as ethos. But those are rhetorical appeals that are used to persuade and convince. So again, this whole idea of using this questionnaire, the rhetorical situation questionnaire, is for us to analyze how language is used to persuade or convince. And we know that this is important because the main purpose of argument is to persuade or convince your audience to adopt your point of view. So you are speaking to those audience members who disagree with you. And there is a, deliberation, there's a real intention in how you work to persuade them, how you use language, how you use your supporting evidence, how you use your research in order to persuade and convince your audience. So this is important. You guys may not see it on the quiz that we are taking on Monday, but you will definitely see this information again and again and again. So let's get a tad bit more familiar with this idea of analyzing the rhetorical situation. That is taking a closer look at how language is used to persuade, okay? So you guys did this with the last article, and there was some really good points made in our last discussion. Sorry, you guys, like I'm grabbing my notes. And in that article, stigmas in mass media, which I know I am remixing that title. We didn't really get to fully get to some of your responses, but I've already taken a look at your homework, and here's what I found. I know that there were more constraints than students shared. So let's go really quickly over what we do when we analyze rhetorical situation. We look at the text. This is all about that claim plus support equals argument. So you're looking at just the structure of argument itself. The text, is the claim clear? Is the support working? Then we also know that since we're looking at how language is used to persuade or convince, how we present it to the audience is very important. So we think about, what do we know about the audience? Who is the target audience? What are we doing to establish common ground? So you guys did really well on that. You talked about what we knew about the author, because an author brings their own experiences and expertise to a writing, and that can also be influential in persuading or convincing an audience. But this particular criteria, constraints, when we are reading or analyzing a text and looking at constraints, we're looking at anything in the text that gets in the way of us fully buying in or fully being persuaded or convinced by the text, right? So this, I noticed in your writing that quite a few of you did identify some constraints. So I saw where some students stated that the author's assumption that the audience is kind of well versed in this medical language kind of got in the way. They felt like some of the language that was used in speaking about diagnosis and mental health was a little bit off-putting. They felt like they didn't really know some of the language, and the author assumed that the audience knew. Now, what that may point to is who the author's intended audience is. Maybe they are intending for it to be an informed audience, those who may be familiar, who may have some type of health background, people who may be interested in this topic. So I can see that. Some people also pointed out how it was this, I think I noticed one student had pointed out that the constraint, something that threw them off, was that the reader kind of came across as, matter of fact, as though they didn't really acknowledge, let's say, other points of views on this, right? So I like that you guys were really open in exploring constraints. And I like what I see here. We have a response from Tatiana. She said a constraint I noticed was that the author was mentioning schizophrenia more. Yes. And how it is impacted on media in depth rather than the other illnesses. Absolutely, Tatiana. I noticed this as well. So they talked a lot about schizophrenia. They mentioned briefly, I believe, depression and OCD. I don't know if you guys remember that, but yes, the majority of the discussion was about schizophrenia and how schizophrenia itself was portrayed in mass media, right? Yeah, they also talked about food disorder as well, anorexia. So yeah, that too. And I definitely wanted to know more about some points that they brought up about anorexia. But yeah, I do agree. There were some mental health, illnesses or issues that was not addressed, and that we also see in mass media. So just quickly, what are some stigmas about mental health? And I had asked this towards the end of class, but again, just to kind of give everybody a chance to add their take on this, just by your own intake of media, whether that's film, whether that is social media, television, whatever. What are some stigmas in mental health that you guys have noticed in film, TV, anything like that? What are some negative perceptions, right? If we're looking at stigma that you guys notice in media that you feel perhaps wasn't addressed in the article? Oh yeah, that whole idea of it'll go away eventually. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. But really quickly, what do you guys, what do you think was left out? It's taboo in many cultures. For example, some cultures don't really take it seriously and don't see it as an actual illness. Oh yeah, so this kind of idea of how it's presented in various cultures. I like that, Leslie, absolutely. So if it is, let's say for instance, a film that may be, may have, let's say, a predominantly white cast, right? There may be the absence of, the cultural stigma of mental illness. But although I think it's present in all races, we know that it varies in certain cultures. I won't say races, but cultures as well. So, for example, let's say if we're considering, let's say this, masculinity, or the culture of, masculinity. Well, mental health in some cases is viewed as a weakness, right? It's viewed as something that you should kind of toughen up about, handle it on your own, don't be weak, be strong enough. So yeah, a lot of times culture representation, I agree, is missing in, well, at least in her assessment. Yeah, that was missing. What else did you guys notice? It says some believe that it will go away or improve if they reach out to a priest. Therefore, they lean towards their religion. Absolutely. So in terms of religion, I know that in my experience or background, let's say with Christianity, how some people would be like, oh, like if you even mention depression, it's like, oh, like pray about it, oh, you'll be fine. Kind of this kind of minimizing it. And she talked about that in the text, this overgeneralization, trivialization, right? Kind of how they too treated OCD. And I talked to a student after class about this, how the article treated, or how some people treat OCD as not almost a negative connotation, but, oh, if you're OCD, you're a perfectionist, or you are this clean freak. When OCD is really a really like a debilitating, you know, mental issue that in some cases keep people from, you know, interacting or living their life. So in some ways it's trivialized or glamorized. Oh, you know, that's my OCD. And people kind of look at it as this badge of cleanliness or perfectionist, right? When we know that that isn't always the case. Tatiana pointed out many view those with mental illness as crazy or psycho. Yeah, that when the author talked about ways to combat these stigmas, she mentioned, or Naveed, I'm not sure if it's he or she, but the author mentioned how we need to get away from these labels, crazy, you know, things like that. And absolutely, we see that. I'll tell you, when I was reading this article, what can I say, a media representation that kind of throws me, or one that I feel could have maybe perhaps been brought up, but maybe not addressed here, because if there was a focus on schizophrenia, is also how trauma, that there doesn't even necessarily have to be a diagnosis. A lot of times trauma can impact our mental health, and that opens it up to it may not just be some of us, but we all are susceptible to issues with mental health and mental illness, especially in cases of trauma. So it brings to mind, have you guys been following you know, the story in the news about Dak Prescott? Look, is that his name? The quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah.
Yeah, and how he kind of came out with his own experiences with mental health and mental illness. He had a brother who suffered from depression. I think he said schizophrenia. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but he had a brother, a family member who suffered with mental health issues, who committed suicide. And due to that trauma, due to that, you know, impact, you know, the quarterback himself talked about his struggles with depression, and also struggles with the stigma of depression, because he's the quarterback and because he's a leader. No one that really comes to him, you know, with you know, kind of check-ins, right? Making sure he's okay. And I think him speaking up about it really showed that anybody, you know, this isn't a them and us. We all are susceptible to mental health issues, especially now with the pandemic. I know I've had friends who have really struggled with anxiety, the fear of catching the disease. Well, they wouldn't necessarily be labeled as schizophrenic or bipolar disorder, but their mental health is definitely in jeopardy. They're definitely struggling. I have friends who are afraid to leave the home. So there's this fear, anxiety. I have friends who have witnessed, you know, gun violence, or who have lost family members to gun violence, or you know, things like that. And that trauma impacts their mental health as well. I know that the artist from Chicago, G Herbo, I don't know if we call him G Herbo, but he spoke out about the trauma, how he suffered through depression and issues with anger and rage as a manifestation of the trauma of gun violence, and, you know, witnessing friends, losing friends, and things like that. So I like that in terms of media, that some people are using their platform in media to kind of confront these images of, oh, it's just them, it's not, you know, your everyday individual, to kind of make it a little bit okay as well, in terms of acknowledging or dealing with it. Yeah, PTSD. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, PTSD, right? And you don't have to be declared as schizophrenic or diagnosed as bipolar to suffer from PTSD. Some people don't even know that they suffer from PTSD. So yeah, this is the issue of stigmas and mental health, all of it, especially to my class of future healthcare professionals, this awareness that you yourself aren't exercising biases, you know, when you practice medicine or when you execute your jobs every day. So I think it's a important issue. And even though there were some constraints in the article, I think it was, informative in this whole debate in how media, you guys remember we read the Malcolm X text on, his letter to young people, research for yourself, learn for yourself, kind of how media can present these images that can misinform us. So I think this was a good discussion in terms of how we may have any misconceptions or misperceptions of mental health in media and what we can do about it. I know I've been on my family as well in the language that they use when talking about people who may have mental health issues, that whole crazy or things like that, making sure we eliminate that from our speech and discussion of it and being a little bit more aware. So, okay, if anything that you guys took away from this discussion, I'm hoping it is how to really analyze the text, an argument, not just the text, but an argument to see how the various parts of that argument can help us to persuade or convince our own audiences. What is this? Sorry, you guys. All right. So with our review of TRACE, you guys see the acronym TRACE. Anytime we consider analysis, right, this whole analyzing argument, we will almost always use the TRACE analysis, and that is rooted in, again, rhetorical situation. We are looking at how language is used to persuade, okay? Now, with that being said, did anybody have any thoughts, last thoughts to add on the article about mass media before I kind of turn the page?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Benito.
I feel like there's a point he didn't bring up that he could have about how the stigma affects the person with the mental disability, because
yes.
some people just think because I have depression I'm weak, and the stigma that everybody else has, they believe it too. They're dealing with it and they should understand this.
Absolutely. Yeah, so how it can impact them and their self-perception. And you know what, Benito, that's a really good point and a really good segue into our article about stereotype threat. So if a person is a fear or has this anxiety about being stigmatized, being labeled due to let's say their depression or their mental health issues, then they keep it to themselves and they suffer as a result, and their family suffers as a result. Then we kind of see that impact of that stereotype threat. Someone is afraid that if I share this with my friend, I'll be viewed as weak, or I'll be viewed as less, and I'm thinking in terms of the stigma of men and mental health. So I'm kind of, using that as an example. But if they feel that, well, if I reach out for help, it'll make me look as weak. It'll kind of be a blow against my manhood, right? A person who is aware of that stigma and aware of that stereotype, it becomes a threat when it would hinder them from getting the help that they need. It kind of becomes a threat, and even a threat to their health, when that awareness keeps them from getting, the therapy or the help that they need. So we'll talk about that, because it can turn around and negatively impact the victim themselves, right? Well, not the victim, I'm sorry, the person who is suffering from that stigma, right? But that's a good point, Benito. Yeah, it's dangerous in terms of, again, that societal impact. All right. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add on that discussion? we know just by looking at how it's talked about now versus how it was talked about, let's say 10 years ago or 5 years ago, that there is progress in the discussion about it. I know I have friends, I have male friends and female friends, but who will openly talk to me about therapy, who will openly talk to me about, well, my therapist is telling me this, where before that used to be a stigmatized ideal, that was something you kind of keep to yourself. There would be some shame. And I don't know if anybody knows this, especially sometimes like Tatiana had mentioned in different cultures, and sometimes in the Black community as well, it's seen as, well, you should be tough. You should go ahead, and deal with that. It's always kind of looked at as a weakness if you have to get help. So I think with this conversation, the whole conversation, we have seen changes in how people approach their mental health. Oh, I'm sorry, Tatiana, Leslie. Yeah, that was Leslie who made that point. Yeah, but we have seen changes in the discussion. All right. So in the article that you guys read for homework and completed the summary for, let's talk about that. And I think what will make our discussion of it easy is the parallels that it runs to stigma. But there is a difference between stigma or, racial stigma versus stereotype threat. So I want to talk about that. Let me pull up our article. Even though this article, when I pull it up, look, it does something crazy with my computer. So as you guys read this, normally what I did is I would just click the print and print it out and get the printed version. But if you read it online, you kind of saw all the little pop-up and things that could really get in the way. But I'm only just bringing this up. I'm not going to keep this up because it's going to slow down my computer. But just so when I reference the author, I have the right name. So hold on, give me 1 second. Did you guys find this article difficult to summarize? Let me ask you that first. Oops. Yeah. I agree with that, Tatiana. So I see yes. She mentioned yes, so much context was given. And that's when you are summarizing, there is always this balance that you have to strike with only focusing on main and key ideas and making sure that you avoid spending too much time in the weeds, or what I call those details or examples, right? So anytime you summarize, there's always this emphasis on only the author's main points, only the author's key idea. But we know when we're reading text, whether it's a book or an article, we know that the author will give context, they'll give background, they'll give examples and details. So you have to be a close reader, somewhat of a strong reader to really separate key points from details, right? So I personally agree. I think that there was a lot of details to kind of weed through in this. So I'll give you guys feedback on the summaries that you submit. But okay, let's get into this really quickly. Again, I just wanted to get the author's name. So this was Joshua Aronson. Is that correct? Is that what you guys all identified as the author when you were writing your summary?
Yeah.
Okay. It's normally right under the title, but I don't see it, but from the bottom. Okay, so Joshua Aronson. Okay. All right, so let's talk about this, but I would like to talk about it in terms of the questionnaire. So let me pull back up that questionnaire. Isn't it? Looking, sorry for moving you guys all over the place. Hold on quickly. Yeah, let's go to the questionnaire, the trace questionnaire. Pull it up on your screen. So together through discussion, we're going to go over the TRACE acronym for us to analyze the rhetorical situation in this article, how the author uses language to persuade and convince you. Because they did make a valid argument in this text. So hold on really quickly. Here it is. All right, so first of all, we know that the rhetorical situation looks at the text. So we'll go through this really quickly, you guys. What did we identify as the author's claim? If you guys had to summarize the author's claim, what is the author's claim in this text? Look, don't be scared, you guys. It's okay. It's okay to speak up, even if you're not sure if you have the right answer, or even if it's the wrong answer. We're kind of learning and practicing this. So, what is your idea? What do you guys think is the author's main idea? So we can start from there.
I have something that I want to add.
Okay, go ahead.
I said stereotypes has divided races. And I also said something like how it affects the academic performance and mental and physical health.
Okay, okay. And that is stereotype threat. It's kind of like that impact. Okay, I like it. It does talk about, through given context and lots of examples, it talks about how stigmas, which then kind of produce stereotype threat in the stigmatized. So Benito, you just brought that up in the last article, how the impact stigmas have on the stigmatized, right? So on that particular group. And the article itself is all about that threat, this stereotype threat, what that impact has on the person or group. So good. I'm glad that you guys identified that. I heard somebody who was going to add something. Did someone want to add something to that?
I was just gonna agree. I feel like it was mainly just focusing on the negative effects stereotypes bring, but I did see one example where the author stated that stereotypes can also bring a positive effect, and that was an example about how African Americans are super good at sports, and kind of like when they see an African American male, they're like, oh, you know, he must be really good at sports.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I just feel like it was all negative.
Yeah, because it was really seeking to establish the negative impacts of this stereotype threat on that group. So the last article talked about, again, you know, mental health in mass media. So we've kind of been introduced to stigma. We know that, well, not kind of, we've been introduced to stigma. We know stigma is negative perception, but what happens to the person who bears the brunt of this negative perception? What does it do, you know, to them and their quality of life? So the article, you know, as you guys accurately stated, it really details the impact of stereotype threat, the negative implications of a particular group or various groups in dealing with that stereotype threat. Okay, so in the discussion, the author, we talked about the examples and the context that it gives, but do you guys believe that the support that the author provides, do we find the support convincing, you know, in steering us to the author's main idea? Are we convinced by the author's argument that stereotype threat is threatening the quality of life of those, you know, impacted?
Yes and no.
Okay. So when you say yes and no, you do you mean that you didn't find the support given in the article convincing, or you did find it convincing, but perhaps maybe you already felt that way? Like, what do you mean by yes and no?
Actually, what you said for the second part, like I feel like there was enough like supporting details that would kind of steer me in the direction of what the author is trying to present to us. But I also feel like, I mean, because in the article there is that point where it starts talking about like the positive impact about stereotyping, and I think I just would have also been really curious as to see like supporting details more about that side as well.
Okay. Yeah. Like, I agree, you know, and again, as audience members, you guys, we can have our opinion about the text, right? I agree that if the main idea was the negative implications, they even use the word threat, right? Stereotype threat. So we know we're talking about kind of the dangers, if you will, right? Then perhaps there should have been no mention of positive, because it did a little bit raise my eyebrow, because I'm like, is a stereotype positive? You know, can that be positive? Even the example that the author brought up about, you know, the African Americans in sports. Well, sometimes that's not a positive, because there'll be, let's say, for instance, a African American who may be, who doesn't like sports or doesn't choose sports or may not be good at sports, but there's this societal expectation that they have to bear or deal with. I know I had a friend in high school who was very tall, like 6'4" when we were freshmen, and everybody expected him to play basketball. But he was more of a reader, more of an artistic guy, and he would get ridiculed and kind of messed with in the fact that he didn't play sports. It's kind of like, you have all this height for nothing, like you're nothing more than your height. So sometimes, you know, me as a reader, that particular example, it didn't resonate very well with me. So I agree. Perhaps maybe the mention of any type of positive maybe worked to water it down just a tad. I agree. I can see that. What about anybody else? Did you guys feel that the argument was clear, and do you feel that it was convincing? All right, if we're kind of on the fence with that, let's look at the kind of support that the author provided in order to, you know, to convince us of their claim, right? They gave lots of examples. What do you guys think about the support given? Was it compelling? Would you have liked to see a different kind of support? What do we think about how the author supported this? Author used studies, yes. So in using studies, they are using research, right? So as an audience member, I want to know, is that research credible? How old is the research? I know they brought up books that they were referencing from like 2006, 2008. You know, I would probably like to see more current studies, right? But they did use studies, yeah. You mentioned, Tatiana, that they provided good examples of stereotypes. I agree with that. The stereotypes that and I like too that they brought in a variety of stereotypes. At first, I'll be honest, when I first started reading and I saw the mention of, you know, African Americans, you know, I don't know, maybe it's the current climate, but sometimes I get a little bit like, oh my goodness, what is it going to be, you know? So I'm glad they didn't focus specifically or only on the stereotype threat in African Americans. I do believe that it's prevalent, yes, but I think other groups as well suffer from the impact of stereotype threat. I think it's sometimes, just like mentioned in the article, it goes beyond race. There's also cultural groups, religions, and all types of things like that. But I do agree with you, Tatiana. I think that the examples given were well-rounded and useful. So Leslie adds, education is seen as a very important skill that we need in life. So the author using education as support can convince many people to agree with his statements. I agree. Education is a example that I think no matter what your demographic is, we can kind of look to that as an important indicator. So them using that was effective. Okay, good. I see that. So I guess the true test on whether or not it was compelling or convincing would be if you disagreed originally with the author's statement. Maybe perhaps we felt like stereotype threat didn't exist. Maybe we felt like it wasn't as harmful or impactful. So if you were persuaded to adopt her point of view, we definitely can claim this argument as convincing or successful. So audience, we are already kind of talking about what we value in the text. So how would you guys define the author's target audience? Who do you think that they're writing this for? I know this is a little tough, but there is no wrong answer here. Just in knowing what I read about the author, he's more of an academic. So he does a lot of writing about education. So I wonder, was he writing to the education community, maybe teachers, maybe administrators? What do you guys think about that? Yeah, education community. Yeah, I can see that, but what else? What else do we think? So Tatiana states the intended audience is towards society in general, probably in order to educate us on how we approach these issues. I agree with that too. And when you say society in general, so he kind of has this general audience, those who he knows values education, those who may be interested in this issue. But where you say general society, did you guys find the language and the information accessible? Did you feel like you had to be a certain grade level or college level in order to follow this, you guys? Okay, good. So Faith says no, and I think that that's indicative of the fact that he kind of made it for a wider audience, more of a general audience. Good, I like that. What else? Tatiana also pointed out that it feels like a conversation between the author and reader. I agree. So and that too speaks to this idea of him speaking to a general audience. I did feel like anybody who he may have met on the street, he could have had this conversation. And I do believe that the goal or purpose of it is to educate. Even how he ended with, here are some things to keep in mind, as to impact, what we can do to avoid this, right? So it definitely felt like a intention to educate and inform and persuade, and persuade his audience to action through this awareness. What about the author, Joshua Aronson? I kind of just let you guys know in my little bit of research I did on him. I did notice that this is a subject, well, really education, but this is a subject that he is interested in because it really falls along his line of work. He had a background in education, writing tests and exams. Did you guys see how he talked about how stereotype threat impacts performance in standardized tests and things like that? So I do feel like he had knowledge about the text, but what did you guys think about the author? Any immediate perceptions, any immediate takeaways you wanted to add? I like, again, how he was, and I think Tatiana mentioned this earlier, how he gave us lots of examples, various examples to really look at this issue. Some examples that he gave was, he talked about the sports stereotype. He talked about how that stereotype even impacts white males. So how this stereotype threat does not discriminate, it can impact those who fall under it. So they talked about the white male with sports. Maybe there's an intimidation anytime they go out for the basketball team, or maybe there is this idea that I won't make the team anyway, or there's too much competition. So that stereotype threat negatively will impact that person and keeping them from pursuing, you know, their interest, right? Yeah, to Caesar, he used examples other than race. So he talked about women, stigmas in terms of, let's say you are a woman in a male field. So let's say I have a family member who's a welder, and the stigma of her being a female welder, how it impacts her every day on her job. There's always an assumption that she knows less. There's always an assumption that she may not be as good because this is a man's job, right? There's always an assumption that she's a little bit more delicate and may need extra help or attention than her male counterpart. So that's a stereotype threat that interferes with her confidence on a job. It interferes with her ability to kind of go and do her job without the impending anxiety and pressure. She also has the extra pressure of wanting to perform at a higher level because she does not want anything to be attributed to her being female on the job. So again, that's a stereotype threat. He talked about, or some stereotype threats that came to mind as I'm reading it. I know that in teaching a particular class that I teach, you know, especially when I have students, a majority of students who have English as a second language, I noticed that there is a stigma that is around, you know, any accents or any, you know, what I don't want to call it language limitations, but what may be viewed as language limitations. And I've seen that stigma silence some of my students. I mean, intelligent, remarkable students who have insight, who have really important things to say. The stigma of someone not being able to understand them due to their accent will silence them. It'll keep them quiet. If they perhaps are asked to, you know, perhaps let's say repeat themselves or things like that, how that gets in the way of their, you know, their ability or need to communicate, and the negative implication in silencing someone who has something to offer, who has something to bring to conversation, who has valid ideas, all because of this threat of a stereotype, right? So I've seen that, you know, manifest. Yeah, I've also seen the stereotype of, what did I say here? Play down the true nature. So I have a few. What are some that come to mind with you guys? I know he gave quite a few examples in the text, but as you were reading that, what were some connections you were making to stereotype threats that you're familiar with or that you've seen around you? Do you guys have any that immediately come to mind? Ooh, I know one. I have one that just came to mind. And he mentioned this in the text too. Do you guys remember he talked about, and it was briefly, that people who come from the South, how they may be reluctant to speak up around, you know, let's say people up north or whatever, because there is this assumption, you know, with this Southern drawl that a person is less educated. Did you guys know that the stereotype of the, you know, anyone coming from the South, are you guys familiar with that stigma, the negative perception? Yeah. So this is one that, again, in some cases transcends race. It's just sometimes we view people from the South, we may call them old country. I've heard the term country bumpkins that may plays on this idea of ignorance, a person who may not know much, somebody who you can easily get over or run one past them, right? And I've seen the stereotype threat of this. I've seen people overcompensate because due to the idea that they are from the South and may be perceived as green or soft or one easy to get over on, I've seen people kind of become bullies or over aggressive to give the idea that, oh, I'm not one to be pushed around, or I'm not, you know, green or weak due to, you know, where I'm from. I've seen it play out differently due to an awareness of that stereotype, right? What are some other things that come to mind, you guys? And throw out maybe about 2 for me. What are stereotype threats that we can add to what the author included in the text? Look, every time I ask you guys to share one, another one pops in my head, but I'm waiting.
Miss Cole, please, can you take the last part again? I didn't get it because kind of
Yeah,
like when I was stuck on.
yeah, sure. I was just saying, so in looking at what the author included in the article about different stereotype threats, the various examples he included, what are some other examples we can add to that? What comes to mind when you guys think of stereotype threats, right? Examples of this negative impact on groups due to this stereotype threat. What comes to mind?
I don't remember if this was in the article, but I remember like people usually say people with low income or come from like poor communities are less educated
Yes.
than those from like higher or like mid-class communities.
Absolutely. That's a great one. And I think he mentioned one similar to that in the article, but so that's the stigma, right? This idea that they are less educated or less sophisticated. We talked about the stigma. I think we talked about stigmas on Monday, and somebody brought up the term ghetto and how that seems to always be associated with, let's say, low income or where a person may grow up or be from, or a person's race. It can be several reasons why that word is hurled around, but the stereotype threat, how that negatively impacts a group is, I've seen people have shame, carry shame associated with the fact that they grew up poor, or there's a shame in mentioning that. So it tends to impact self-esteem. It tends to impact how a person views themselves. And that's it's heavily unfortunate, but it speaks to, again, the stigma, this negative perception. But based on how the author discusses it in the article, they are again discussing how stigmas threaten the quality of life for the stigmatized. So those under the stereotype of threat, how it impacts them can affect their health. It can affect how they interact and engage in society. So it has these longer lasting implications. One, that even if you never come in contact with the person, you can still come in contact with those results, right? Even on your job, someone who may come in and have a particular issue or problem, they can project that onto you, you know, so it shows up in a lot of various ways. Anybody else wanted to add to that? Anything else you can think of?
Yes, there's this one I am thinking of. The moment you say you're from Africa, the first thing that comes to people's mind is you're from you're from the poor part of Africa, or you're from Nigeria.
Yeah. And I know this to be true for a fact. There's always this idea, especially Africa, where you pointed out Africa, it's a stigmatized continent, right? And what people think about it is always connected to those images, right? How it's viewed, how media has presented it. So the stigmatized view is that it's poor country. You know, anytime, again, just like we just heard, anytime you think of poor, you think of uneducated, but the error in that thinking is that African immigrants, especially those from Nigeria, they tend to be some of the most educated immigrants. And that the impact of that stereotype, the threat of that stereotype, is that this particular group, due to the fact that we may think that anything you give them is better than what they had before, a lot of times this educated group is offered lower paid jobs. They are relegated to certain, only being looked at or hired for particular jobs because there is a lack of understanding of, you know, things like education or sophistication. So the threat of that stereotype can impact that person's livelihood. It can impact that person's life. So again, stereotype threat, kind of showing these negative implications. But absolutely, Julia, I see it all the time. Or the idea that a person who speaks a different language, this idea that they are ignorant or uneducated or no less than, or I'll even kind of speak to it in terms of our current climate, this idea that they are foreigner or other. That is a stigma. It's a negative perception, and one that is not based in any real fact. I personally think that to be bilingual is a higher level of education. To be able to switch back and forth, to be able to carry two languages in your head at the same time. If anything, that's a higher level to me of cognitive skill of thinking. But we know that the stigma attached with that is, this idea of, oh, well, if you don't know the language, you don't know much, right? And when we know, well, we need to know that that is not the case. All right, one more, and I'm putting this to bed, but another one that just popped into my head, stereotype threat. One that may be seen as positive. You guys know that when we think about stereotype threat, the author talked about how there is this stereotype in the African American community of inferiority, especially when it comes to academics. And that stereotype or stigma or stereotype, it threatens that particular group because sometimes we will overcompensate in terms of education. So in a particular group, I don't know if any of you, which I think most of us have been raised like this, any marginalized group, no, we normally have to fight against stereotypes or stigmas. But there was this saying when I was younger. Well, not when I was younger. It's been a long time saying, but we have to be twice as good as others. We have to be twice, 2 times better, and even though that was an ideal that got positive results due to this need to really prove that stereotype wrong, there's a group who may go harder to show that in no way will you put me in a box as uneducated or ignorant. So this idea of you must be 2 times better, sometimes that's a harmful reality. Sometimes it's harmful. It's almost an accepting of a stereotype. And it also can add stress and anxiety and, this whole idea of fear of failure that can paralyze or cripple a particular group. I've seen when we must be twice as good, I've seen that go wrong. I've seen people put immense pressure on themselves, to perform or to outrun this stereotype. So I like this whole topic of stereotype threat, because I don't know if people are always aware that, yes, we can exercise these stereotypes, but do you know the harm in exercising those stereotypes? Do you know how it impacts a particular group? And, what that can do in the long run in terms of their health or in terms of the society that they operate in. There's always this, oh, I'm sorry, Jorge, I think I missed it just a little while ago. You brought in, he mentioned the stereotypes of Asians excelling in math. Oh, that's a good one. That's another one. Because I have Asian friends who despise that stereotype. They are always, they always get a comment if they don't do well in math. There's always some type of eyebrow raised, like, you fail in math, as though it's impossible. So again, I've seen how that stereotype can become a burden. So again, that's a good example, Jorge. All right, we got 8 more minutes, and I want to introduce our paper assignment before you guys get out of here. So let's talk about that. Okay, lastly on this, in this article, any constraints, you guys, really quick. I think somebody mentioned early on that you felt like it was all over the place. Lots of context and background to work through as a constraint. You guys agree with that?
Yeah.
All right, I agree. Any other constraints that you guys noticed?
Personally, I feel like most of the stereotypes he was obviously like trying to, or they were obviously trying to like convey, were just mainly about like minorities or
Yeah.
people of color.
Yeah, I picked up on that too. Yeah, I agree. And
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if it's because of the current climate, everything that's kind of going on in the world around us, but the minute I read it, it just made me feel a certain kind of way. So sometimes even what I bring to a table, it may not have been no intention of the author, but what the audience may bring to the table can sometimes get in the way as well. But I do agree with that, you guys. One last thing, did you guys notice, and when we look at exigence, exigence looks at the cause of this, of the debate. What prompted him to sit down and write this article, right? What do you guys, if you could pinpoint an exigence, a cause that prompt him, or if I can say, what is he responding to, right? What do you think this argument is in response to? What do you guys think? And I'll give you a hint. He mentioned it in the article. Or he or she, he mentioned it. Okay, only in the entrance of time. No, I'm cracking myself up today. As you guys can see, I'm really interested in these topics as well. So I don't mean to step on any toes if I'm moving too fast. But in the text, the author talked about how his research, his information that he's presenting contradicts, it presents the counter argument. He used the term counter argument to the text, the bell curve. And that was a book that concluded that a lot of these stereotypes, especially the one about African Americans and their intellectual ability, is fixed. It's one that's rooted in their, let's say genes, in their DNA. It's natural. So he wrote this, a whole idea of stereotype threat, what it means, how it impacts performance, to respond to the argument that, a particular stereotype, certain stigma is true. So he's disputing it. This is a counter argument in response to that bell curve book. So if you guys missed that, you get to. Now next week we'll talk more about the rhetorical appeals, and that is logos, ethos, and pathos. So I haven't forgotten that you guys mentioned that. I can see an awareness of it already, but we'll really dive into those rhetorical strategies next week. All right, with that being said, let me stop share really quickly. And let's go into our paper topic. With the paper topic, I haven't posted it yet. Oh, that's not it. But I will. I wanted to introduce it to you guys first. Didn't want to scare you. So, and with this, I believe this is it. With this essay assignment, it gives a little bit more information too about guidelines. So we'll talk about that. Hold on. This is not it. All right. So let me share my screen. And what I want us to do over the weekend, as we're kind of making this move from, hold on, I'm sorry. Stop share. Post it up. All right. So I'm going to post this, so don't worry if you guys feel like you can't see it really well. I can make it a tad bit bigger though. Or if you feel like, you want to review it on your own, I am posting this, but just to introduce, first essay assignment is coming up. It will be due September 28th. So we have about 2 weeks from conception to kind of start research, to kind of get our ideas in. So we have time in, submitting final draft, when this will be due. So you guys know that. For this assignment, you guys will be constructing an argument, a 5-paragraph argument that will be based on your response to one of the 3 options. So we're going to talk about the options. So let's go ahead and go over the options in the interest of time, and then we'll kind of talk about format and all of that. So based on the things that we've been reading and covering this week, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of room or space to go into that discussion further. So one option that students have to write on is this whole idea about the issue of stereotype threat. I tried to have some little setup for this first possible topic when I was asking you guys, what are some stereotypes that you identify, right? So the first question will allow you to take that particular stereotype threat and develop it into an argument by discussing the consequences or impact within society of this threat, okay? So again, the first topic is students writing an argument essay that identifies a stereotype threat within a particular group and arguing its consequence or impact within society, okay? Books from websites. Absolutely, Tatiana. So Tatiana asked the question, we can use evidence from books and websites. Yes. You guys completed that internet research scavenger hunt to blow the dust off our research skills. I want you guys, and you guys did really well too. I could see in your responses the variety of searches that you guys were going through. So yes, first step, and the reason I'm giving you guys this assignment prior to the weekend is I want you to use the weekend to research, look at both sides of these debates, make an informed decision about where you stand, and then we'll work on building our own claim and using the research to support and develop it. So one topic is this about a stereotype within a particular group, you arguing its impact and consequences, okay? The second topic, it deals with inequality. So what do you think contributes to the inequality between male and female athletes? So we're looking at a controversial issue, the gender pay gap, and we're looking at it in a specific context of the sports world. So if this is a topic that may be of interest to you, you can pick this topic, argue what specifically do you think contributes to the inequality in pay. Is it promotion? How those sports are promoted? Is it the media? Is it perhaps the reception by coaches and fans? What contributes to the inequality? So this is an argument you guys can explore further. And your third option is in the current climate with social justice protests taking place all around us. What do you guys think about protests? Is it an effective tool to bring about change on issues like racial inequality or injustice? So you guys have a few controversial issues to explore. You're only writing on one, so you're selecting one. I encourage students to kind of move outside of your comfort zone. So if you know automatically what you want to write about, you know, because you already formed an opinion, maybe consider the one you don't know much about as well. But keep in mind, first step in writing our arguments in any argument or debate is research. That is the first go-to. So maybe you will need to do research to determine which topic to write on. Maybe you know already just by looking at this which topic you'll write on, so you'll go straight to researching your topic. But I do not want you guys to limit yourselves with research. Research those if you're for it, research if you're against it. Research your opponent's side as well, and use all of that information to make an informed decision as to where you stand, okay? And then we'll talk about on Monday, thesis statement or our claim, that's synonymous with claim, and starting the writing process. So we'll talk more about that on Monday, okay? So before we go really quickly, what do you guys think about the topics? What do you think about the timeline? What do we think about this first essay? Okay, I see, looks good. What do we got? What do you guys think for the first paper topic? How do we feel about these options or about the assignment itself? All right, I see interesting. I see looks easy question mark. All right, we'll talk about it. And again, you guys remember rhetorical situation. You want to consider the issue, whatever you pick as issue, but you also want to be mindful of your intended audience. Think about what will I need to include to persuade or convince my intended audience. You also want to think about yourself as arguer. What do you bring to the table? What unique or insightful position, what's a new unique or insightful way you can present your position. So I think this will be interesting for us to explore further. So take a look over the weekend, research again to come up with your topic. If you know your topic, we're starting research. Try to move outside of Google, you guys. Use Google Scholar, and if need be, go to the list of what I call credible search engines that I posted on Brightspace. All right, so I'm definitely going to stop holding you guys over. If you guys don't have any questions, I am free to dismiss you. I'm posting this right now to week 4. I'll post it to week 4 module, but I'm going to again add it to week 5 module just to keep it front and center. Okay. All right, my people. I appreciate your ear today. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss. If you have a question, stay around. I'll wait a tad bit after class to answer any questions. Have a good one, you guys.
Have a nice day,
Thank
Miss
you.
Cole.
All right, see you, Julia.